All right, so let's move to our second story, which I worked on this week. And it was a very, very interesting story. There were reports of souring relations between Pakistan and Saudi. And the reports initially, like that's how basically I found out about the souring relation, was that a Pakistani general was traveling to Saudi Arabia to have talks with Saudi officials um, uh, about their relationship. In the initial reports, it was mentioned that it was mainly focused on defense issues, and then that got me into the whole Saudi-Pakistan relation because traditionally they've been, you know, they are very, very strong allies. In even it's been a joke somewhat within, in international politics that, uh, you know, Pakistan is the army of Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia funds the Pakistani government so much. So I got into that, and it was fascinating to see how changing international politics is affecting Pakistani-Saudi relations, and it's very multifaceted. But just to give a quick update on the general visit, the general visit was quite a disappointment. He ended up meeting with basically a chief of staff and the deputy defense minister. So he was snubbed the meeting with Mohammed bin Salman or even the minister himself. So that trip seems to have not worked. But yeah, but did you hear anything about that? Any coverage of that in any news channel?
No, not at all. And you mentioned the story, but I didn't go actively seeking. I just thought we'd take it from here, and you can kind of tell me more about this story. But so you mentioned that Saudi and Pakistan had strong relations historically. So let's say what over the past few decades that would mean. But what about the last year or two? What have been things that have kind of undermined the relationship between the two countries?
Well, yeah, interesting. All right. So let's just start here. When I was doing my research, it turned out that it goes back, so, about 6 years. India has significantly improved its relation with Sunni Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia. And they recently, I think about 2 years ago, they signed a massive economic deal, heavy investment from Saudi Arabia inside India. So, and India is obviously, uh, say the most significant enemy of Pakistan. That's a given, I suppose. So that's been developing slowly, on the side. And then about 2 years ago, was it? I think you had the recent actions by Indian government to take away the autonomous rights of the people in Kashmir, the part of Kashmir that India controlled anyway, which obviously pissed off Pakistan a lot. At some point, there were airplanes going on both sides. It almost came to a war, basically. So have that in mind as well. Well, when that happened, when India took away the autonomy of the Kashmir region, Pakistan expected a strong support from Islamic countries and its traditional allies, including Saudi Arabia. But surprisingly, it did not happen at all. And especially after there was a summit in, I think it was in Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I'll have to check this. In the links we put below, you can definitely check the details for sure. But I'm not sure if it was in Malaysia or Indonesia. But there was a summit that Iran, Qatar, and Turkey attended, and Pakistan did not attend because Saudi Arabia didn't want them to. So they didn't attend because Saudi didn't want them to. And then when they asked to have a summit to support the Kashmiri Muslim people in the under the control of India, Saudi Arabia basically did not support them. and they basically issued a statement saying that, oh, people, both sides should, calm down. There should be a peaceful resolution. You're a standard, it's none of our business type thing. So from that, you see the relations getting, cooler and cooler. Then the foreign minister of Pakistan gave some explosive interviews, sort of saying that, if Pakistan's traditional allies don't help us out, we might turn to other Muslim nations. We will help the people of Kashmir no matter what, blah, blah, blah. And increasingly, Pakistan is getting closer to Turkey, which is a fellow Sunni country with very similar views on the Kashmiri situation. They are very pro-Kashmir, pro-Muslim Kashmir anyway. So, and this is, Saudi Arabia is not a fan of Turkish foreign policy, especially under Erdogan, because they see it as a return of Turkish imperialism, and, they see themselves as the first targets of that. So all these different issues basically are causing the deterioration of the situation between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. The added factor is the Chinese element. China itself has massive issues with India, border issues. Recently there were clashes. I think about a dozen of people got killed. So, and China has very, very deep and old relations with Pakistan. So China is basically using this situation to further develop its relation with Pakistan. I think today or soon, there are officials from Pakistan going to talk with the Chinese Foreign Ministry in Beijing to further develop their relation in terms of a Belt and Road Initiative. So China is using these fractions to grow its influence in Pakistan. As same thing that probably Turkey is doing at the same time. And interestingly, we see that India is getting closer to Saudi Arabia as well as Israel. They are dealing with Israel a lot. So we are basically seeing an interesting new regional blocks being formed. India getting closer to Arab Muslim countries, and Israel getting closer to Arab countries, China getting closer to Pakistan, and perhaps Iran and Turkey to an extent. So it's very interesting that we are seeing these shifts, because back in the days, pretty much it was the opposite. Pakistan was the strong ally of US during the Cold War, and India was the strong ally of Soviet Union. And it's all shifting around now, and the Chinese element being added. It's very, very fascinating development. But God knows how it's gonna go, because what do you say? Alliances in the developing world tend to be a lot more fickle than people expect them to be. So I don't know where it's gonna go, but it's very, very interesting.
That's interesting, but I guess Pakistan will still be quite comfortable that it's maybe, I mean, to some extent, that its military relationship with Saudi is, I mean, that's something strong and powerful that the Saudis would probably not want to ruin too much.
Uh, it's not clear, to be honest. Saudis have been acting quite, strangely. They even called back a loan they gave to Pakistan, and Pakistan then had to get money from China to pay back that loan. It was a loan for oil refineries or something. So, yeah, God, no. Pakistan's issue is not I mean, Pakistan's military is very strong, probably one of the strongest among Muslim nations. Their issue is money. And the question is whether Turkey, China, can they provide as much money as Saudi Arabia, which is going to be very, very hard. Nobody has as much cash as Saudi Arabia. That's the first issue. Second issue is the I think there are about a million or a very significant number of Pakistanis working Saudi Arabia, and they send money back to Pakistan. You know, so that's another big issue, that there is a significant minority of Pakistanis working in Saudi Arabia. So if the relations get further soured, those people might be, they might get affected significantly. Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has been trying to downplay the tensions, but I think geopolitically speaking, things seem to be not going his way.
See, and you briefly mentioned Iran, but have Pakistan and Iran strengthened relationships recently, or just what's the status of the relationship between these two countries, between Pakistan and Iran?
Pakistan and Iran are very odd. They've always been very odd neighbors. But recently, when the China-Iran deal got signed, Pakistan was very welcoming, because Pakistan is trying to distance Iran from India, which Iran and India usually have much better relations than Iran and Pakistan. There is Iran. There are Pakistan is a relatively new nation, right? And there are parts of Pakistan that Iran sees as its traditional homeland. And then there is the issue of Taliban. Pakistan has been a strong supporter of Taliban. For a very, very long time, Iran was a massive enemy of Taliban. And there are separatists in Baluchistan area there are separatists in Baluchistan area of Iran and Pakistan, and both government accuse each other's government of not doing enough, basically helping the separatists. So relations are very strange and odd, but Iran is usually, traditionally, Islamic Republic is not very active in terms of foreign policy compared to Turkey or compared to Saudi Arabia. So Iran is basically hasn't responded to these situations a lot. They basically wait and see, I think. I think that's their main policy. And because it's a Shia nation, there is that tension as well. Pakistan is a Sunni nation, so Turkey is in a much stronger position to develop its ties. Iran is much more of the relationship might get affected, but I don't think it's gonna have, Iran is not gonna become a big player in Pakistan suddenly. Pakistan is always seen closer to Sunni and Arab countries, and Iran is closer to India, traditionally speaking. Although Iran-Indian relations are getting worse, so in 10 years, 20 years, who knows? But in immediate future, I don't think so.
Yeah, and I'd forgotten about the Taliban angle and aspect.
I mean, to be fair, Iran itself has apparently has worked with Taliban at some points when it benefited them. But the relationship between Iran and Taliban is largely largely a very negative relationship. They're enemies.
Yeah, and Iran, correct me if I'm wrong, but in a way went to war them at a certain extent in the very beginning when the US invaded Afghanistan, right?
Iran, there was an incident where Taliban killed Iranian diplomats, I think 8 Iranian diplomats, and Iran almost started a war. This was before 9/11. But that war didn't happen. But when Americans came to Afghanistan, Iran, basically there is a great documentary by BBC. I think it's called Iran and the West. Highly recommend everybody watch that. But Iran basically told US where to bomb with their airplanes to take out the Talibani forces. So they didn't directly, send forces, but they did give a strategic assistance to US for sure, for sure. But Pakistani relation to Taliban is, I mean, it's far closer. I mean, some analysts describe Taliban as part of Pakistani intelligence services. So, it's yeah, it's a very different relationship compared to Iran's relationship to Taliban. And yeah, because of those issues, I don't think Iran will develop its relationship a lot with Pakistan. But I do think Turkey probably gonna step up its efforts in, in developing its relations with Pakistan.
Interesting. And this rift between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, I guess it hasn't reached a point yet for the Western world, especially for the US to comment, or has anything been said from the West?
No, well, I think they right now the West is so busy with its own problems. I mean, I must say I don't like that term, the West, but we are just using it as a, just for the ease of conversation. But yeah, America is too busy with its elections, with the Middle East, with the Chinese issue, and I think European countries, same, Corona, all of that. So no, I haven't seen anybody really. No, I haven't seen any official commentary, or even I haven't seen much, to be honest, much coverage from Western news agencies. I read most of this from BBC's uh, Persian sector, as well as Al Jazeera. These type of things. I haven't read much in English sources about this. Yeah, but it's a fascinating story, both in terms of uh, the evolving situation in Saudi Arabia, the evolving situation in Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, and the increasing role China is going to play in the global stage.
No, definitely, definitely another story then I think that we have to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, hopefully,
I
hopefully
feel
it's
like
going to
every
get more exciting.
I feel like every story that we cover, we're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to keep our eyes on this, on this
And
story.
yeah, well, I think I might be paraphrasing, but this is a quote from one of my favorite comic books, which is a very political comic book, The Watchmen. As one of them, I think it's one of the last lines. One of the characters says that nothing ever ends. So